We are on Owen Beach, located inside the Point Defiance Park, and are going to discuss the possibility of a major earthquake in Tacoma area. Our goal here is not to intimidate you, but rather to educate you on the basics of plate tectonics, how earthquakes work, and the potential effects that a large earthquake would have on the city of Tacoma. We will also provide some examples and historical background of earthquakes in this region and hopefully give you some suggestions on preparing and planning for a potential hazardous situation large earthquakes can often present. The Earth's surface is like a jigsaw puzzle of plate tectonics. Here in Washington State, we are situated on the North American Plate, and around 50 to 100 miles off the coast of Washington, the Juan de Fuca Plate subducts under the North American Plate. This interaction between the two plates, North American and Juan de Fuca, is a convergent boundary and is called the Cascadia subduction zone. Along this convergent boundary, three types of earthquakes can occur: subduction zone earthquakes, earthquakes deep within the Juan de Fuca Plate, and also crustal earthquakes. These convergent boundaries are known to be associated with not only large volcanic mountain chains, but also large and devastating earthquakes. The energy of an earthquake can be felt by what seismologists call primary and secondary waves, or P&S waves. P waves can travel through anything solid or liquid and are relatively the first to be felt, but S waves, which usually cause the most damage, can only travel through solids and are amplified in softer materials, like clay and sand.
So far, we know that in Washington area, which has a convergent boundary, has the potential for large earthquakes. However, earthquakes primarily occur along fault lines. A fault line is a crack between sediments or rock layers that is created when built-up stress or strain has been released. The southern Puget Sound area has many fault lines, and one directly affects the Tacoma area. The Tacoma fault line has a branch that cuts through Gig Harbor and into Commencement Bay. This means that the setting for a large earthquake in this area has a high probability.
In fact, here on Owen Beach, there is historical evidence of earthquakes within the layers of sediment on this cliff face. Here we have a fault cutting between these layers of soft sediment. This is an example of a normal dip-slit fault where the hanging wall moves down with respect to the footwall due to tension forces.
This is just one example. Scientists have traced back the historical seismic activity of the Tacoma Fault and discovered a trend or pattern which shows compelling evidence for great magnitude earthquake along the Cascadia subduction zone. These earthquakes were evidently enormous with a magnitude greater than 8 and reoccurred on average every 550 years. The reoccurrent interval, however, has apparently been irregular, as short as 100 years and as long as 1100 years. The last of these great earthquakes has struck Washington about 300 years ago. Okay, that was.
So what will happen to the city of Tacoma and its surrounding area if a large earthquake happens? Again, keep in mind that S waves are the most destructive, last the longest, and are amplified in softer solids like mud, clay, and sand. Now, the port of Tacoma was built on a large wetland area and is the delta for the Puyallup River. Also, the city of Tacoma is situated on softer sediment as well, like this clay, mud, and sand that can be seen here on this cliff face. These two examples could devastate the Tacoma area should a major earthquake occur on the Tacoma Fault because 1. The amplification of S waves through the softer material that Tacoma sits on could topple buildings, destroy houses, and cause fires, just to name a few hazards, and 2. Should those S waves hit the port of Tacoma where there was once a large wetland area, liquefaction can occur and potentially create major loss of revenue for the port as seen with the Kobe earthquake in Japan. According to this diagram from a model of a 7.1 magnitude earthquake on the Tacoma Fault, liquefaction is a major potential hazard in the greater Tacoma area, especially the port of Tacoma and along the Puyallup River.
To conclude this documentary, the Puget Sound is vulnerable to earthquakes. This can be seen with many fault lines distributed within the region. The spreading of the Pacific Plate and the Juan de Fuca Plate due to an offshore fault pushes the Juan de Fuca Plate under the North American Plate, a process called subduction. Although P and S waves will be felt by Tacoma community and will cause devastation to the city, there are ways to prepare and minimize casualty. According to Pierce County Department of Emergency Management, surviving an earthquake requires preparation, planning, and practice. Far in advance, you can gather emergency supplies, identify and reduce possible hazards in your home, and practice what to do during and after an earthquake. Learning what action to take can help you and your family to remain safe in the event of an earthquake.